those external cues, I'm not feeling too good. I'm not feeling too blessed. I'm not feeling too rich and satisfied. And what I notice is that I feel disempowered because I notice that my mood is dependent on who I'm around. So when I'm around depressed people or low people or people that, whatever that is, that's negative for you, that if you're around that and you're notice that who I am and how I'm speaking and how I'm excited, how much enthusiasm I have, etc., is dependent on my circumstances, that doesn't really allow you much play for creating something different. So, what's that mean? It means that somehow I have to derive those feelings not based on my external cues. Well, that's a little challenging if I'm not used to doing that, because that means I've got to derive my own joy and gratitude and satisfaction and loving feelings from myself. Well, that's sometimes a little tricky, depending on our past and our thinking and our beliefs and how we feel about ourselves and our life, etc. But it's the only thing we got. Otherwise, we're just fluctuating like the boat that's depending on the wind, the sailboat. So, do you think it might take practice to develop a sense of satisfaction in oneself, a sense of loving compassion in oneself? And it takes practice to do that, especially when we haven't done that much. And we can take some of AA. Can I possibly address the feeling, and again, I don't want it to be going overly spiritual, but somehow that the universe, somehow God, somehow something bigger, somehow the field of the world somehow is happier when I'm happy than when I'm not. Right? That there's something, that there's a way that I can look outside myself and knowing that when I'm in a loving state, when I'm in a heartfelt state, when I'm in a compassionate, connected to others state, that I'm better than when I'm not. And if I can start to realize that and feel non-judged, and if I can take on, and I'll use the analogy for a second, if you have an analogy or a thought or belief system that God is this loving being that loves you no matter what and doesn't judge you, whatever you want to call that state of being non-judged and just loved without limitations and loved without any restrictions, if you can start to apply that feeling to self, and you can go to Buddhist practices and talk about, you know, loving kindness meditations and metta and many different practices. So again, it's really not particular to any tradition. But if you can cultivate that state of self-love and you start to cultivate that feeling of what it feels like to be good inside despite whatever circumstances are happening, you start to resonate in a brainwave state and probably many other energetic states at a very different frequency. And they know the electromagnetic waves from HeartMath of the heart go at least up to about 10 to 20 feet beyond our body. It's not restricted within this. We know that for sure. That's been proven. Much more powerful than the electromagnetic waves of the brain. The heart is basically an incredibly powerful organ on an energetic level. And so when they develop heartfelt states, very powerful. Study, okay, here's a great study. You want to affect change, it takes two things. It takes one, a focused attention on what you want to achieve or create. Call it intention for a moment. But when they do studies, for example, when they did at HeartMath, the DNA unwinding studies, they take test tubes, and they've done this, and they've taken a test tube, and they know that there's a certain helical twisting structure to the DNA. And when they took a group of people, of healers, people in the healing profession, and they said, we want you to focus your intention on unwinding that DNA or changing it somehow, tightening it or loosening it or altering it some way. And they set for a certain amount of time and they focused their intention on changing it, and then they measured it. Guess what? Nothing. Dang. And then they took another group and they taught them these HeartMath techniques of what we call creating coherence, which is a state, a relaxed state in which our brain waves and other waves are in a much more coherent and less erratic state. And they said, we want you to just send that loving energy for change to that and create that feeling in your body and just really generate with that and send it out. And then they measured, and guess what? Nothing. And then they took a third time and they said, okay, let's create that strong intentional thought of this is going to change, and let's combine it with the feeling so that the body and mind are in alignment. And guess what? Up to 25% change in the DNA helical structure. In the test tube. God, you have an ability to do something outside your body? Yes, you do. Okay.
was watching Channel 9 about a week ago, and there was a scientist talking about that, something about the happiness factor, and they did an MRI study, and could see what happened in a brain when the person was just smiling and having happy feelings. And then they did the study again and said, okay, now don't smile, just, you know, just lay there, whatever. But a technician or nurse or someone was smiling like far off from the machine, and that same area lit up. It's like somehow, without them even seeing or anything, they could tell that smile was there.
You mean we influence each other?
So, yeah, amazingly.
Wow.
I thought that was really interesting.
That's science, though.
Yeah, that was
That's not just woo-woo.
That was just science.
It's true. You know, you take athletes mentally rehearse all the time. They're one population that knows it. But, for example, you know, another famous study is the piano study, so where they basically took piano players and they had them practice something 2 hours a day, every day for a certain period of time. They measured the brainwave states and the changes in the brain over time. Then they took another group of people and they said, okay, we want you to picture doing those scales and doing those 2 hours a day, same changes in the brain. Mentally rehearsing as well as doing it physically. So the brain in many ways doesn't always know the difference between what's real, external real, and internal real. So as a society, we need to start relearning the capacity of our brain and think of enhancing our brain as more than doing Sudoku. Okay? Right? More than doing crossword puzzles. We have some capacity to do more than that. That's not saying that's bad. I'm just saying the possibilities of enhancing change in your life are significantly enhanced when we learn to cultivate attention and to increase our time and focus. And we start to learn. You think that when you know, the studies that show with meditation that not only does our attention increase, which means we can keep our attention on creating something positive or changing in our life longer, which makes a difference. It changes our brain. It literally thickens the cortex of the brain. Brains anatomically change with these kinds of practices. Like measurable changes in relatively short periods of time. That, not only that, but I totally lost my thought. So basically, so we looked at, But even the studies when they showed, for example, the mental rehearsal of the piano, and there were some other ones that were one that was as far as gripping, that they actually showed that the thinking about the exercise actually changed the strength as well in the hands to a statistically significant degree. So when we start to look at what we're capable of compared to what we're actually doing with our brains, we got a lot of room. We really do, a lot of possibility of starting to say, who's determining my future? My environment and the external circumstances are me. And the ability of then to be co-creating with a higher power, with the universe, with forces that we don't understand, etc. Now we're starting to talk about really leading a powerful life in which we're creating our futures, not the circumstances. And this ability to start to take some ownership and take some power back, rather than having feelings of victimization, victims of circumstance, etc. And I'm not saying that there aren't real challenges to overcome with that. So please, I want to be really clear with that. Many of us are born to really difficult circumstances. You know, we're privileged living here, and so many of us around the world don't have. But we can tell you, no matter what, you start to look at Mandela's, and you start to look at Gandhi's, and you start to look at people that have overcome, it's because they've had a mind that can look beyond their current circumstance, and they can look forward here, despite not having the evidence of it here. And that's the same as you and me. My life sucks here. You know, relationships bad, money is bad, whatever. All those things are bad here. I have to have the ability to look beyond that to here and find a path to get there. But the first thing I have to have is that vision of that. Then I have to start to know what it feels like to have that. So I can generate those feelings, so I can generate that gratitude, so I can generate what it would be like if I had that, not as in jealousy, not as in lacking, like it would be great if I had, but what would it feel like if it was here now? Because that's what starts to change your internal state and radar and projecting of information. I mean, how many of you know this to be true when you're around people that are, you know, they've had hard circumstances and that's all they talk about? Does it make you really want to be in that presence a long time? You know, we're compassionate beings, so we do, but there's a part of us that over enough time starts to pull away from that. And here you're their best friends. They're the people that they can count on that have compassion and heart. But we also as beings want to resonate to that which takes us to our next level of whatever we want. And if that, over a period of time, doesn't bring us in that direction, we tend to separate a little bit, unless there's some addiction to helping, etc., and doing that. So doing it consciously is none of it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that we want to start to become conscious of our motives and behaviors with regard to those things. Okay. That. It was interesting. You know what is funny? I was talking to Alina last night, and we were on way back from Seattle, and we were talking about addictions and giving up things and how to do them. And she said, "Where does the phrase cold turkey come from?" To give up something, I had no idea. So we looked it up. See, technology serves a purpose. So the first thing that they gave was, it said, okay, like for example, when people were giving up heroin and they were going through their detox, that their skin would get so pale and goosebumpy that it would look like a turkey skin. So the physiological response of that, which is true, that happens, but it had nothing to do with where cold turkey came from. Where it came from was in the 1800s when people would talk turkey. In other words, the ability to just get right to the point, and we're not going to BS around, we're going to get right to the point. So when somebody goes cold turkey, they're going right for the jugular of the habit. They're just saying, I'm out of here, I'm not wasting time with all this, I'm just going right there. So there are many ways to get there, right, as we start to wind down. And there are many useful techniques to get to places to become aware of things, to witness things. There are many ways to start to get to our subconscious. There are many ways to have social support systems. So there are a lot, there's so much room here. But I think that hopefully what I addressed was some of the really key pieces that, when put in place, make a real and substantial difference in starting to observe your life and starting to make the choices of which habits you wish to keep, which ones you don't, and then starting to at least begin to go, how do I move in that direction? So some of the things that I mentioned, just other things that are on the table here so you know, with regard to bringing choice to relationship. My wife and I do a lot of courses and online classes on relationship and making conscious choices about what's my responsibility, what's my addictions, what are my habits in this, and do they work or not? Is it the other person? So deciding whose responsibilities each are in a relationship and whether you choose to continue in that, if it's supportive or not. So we have a website, and there's an article from Lily Poe magazine, thanks to Christy, who's the editor here, and it's a great article of when to end it, what to say. EFT is a very powerful technique. It just happens that we're having a training coming up next weekend here on the island, which we do twice a year. I also pull from work from Right Brain Aerobics, which Sandra Rodman developed here on the island, and it just so happens there's a one-day tomorrow. So there are different flyers for different things here. I also want to mention, if this kind of conversation intrigues you, we have these wonderful dialogues once a month at the office. You may have heard the transformational dialogues. This month, Leslie Cotter, David White's wife, is going to be speaking on how do we bring this awareness and consciousness to our young girls and basically have them, create them into powerful women. So that's this month's talk at the end of the month. If you don't already get, sometimes they make it to Drew's list, sometimes we miss it. But if you're not on the newsletter, I send out a once-a-month newsletter about topics and articles like this and different events. So there's an email sign-up, and we don't give out emails, obviously. There's a sign-up for the dialogue. So there's lots of stuff there. I post a lot of interesting articles. If you do happen to do social media and Facebook, the Chiropractic Zone has a fan page, because I'm not going to send you studies every day. I promise to not do that to your email. But on Facebook is where I post a lot of them, so if you're interested. So in summary, I guess in closing, because we're right there, I want to thank you for your attention, because attention is really a valuable commodity, as we've seen. I mean, literally, I've had your attention for 90 minutes, so thank you. I do not take that lightly at all. A beautiful Saturday morning on a gorgeous end of the summer day that you're here, I do not take that lightly at all. So, my prayer as I sat before here was that somehow something I said touched each person in a way that makes a difference, whatever that is. I'll be here for a little bit if you want to talk to me personally. We have classes and coaching and lots of things, but you can just talk to me about anything. And I just, in summary, want to say thank you. I'm really grateful.
Thank you. Thank you.